Tired single mom falls asleep on CEO's shoulder on a bus, but when she wakes up and looks at his face, her world is shattered. Hello, my beloved family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Your presence here fills my soul with indescribable joy and profound gratitude. You are not just viewers. You are my heart, my inspiration, my everything. I am deeply honored by your trust and devotion. Every story I share is a love letter written especially for you, because without your beautiful souls, I am nothing. To our 25,000 precious family members, my heart overflows with love beyond words. To our newest angels joining us, you are stepping into a sanctuary of unconditional love, where every heart is treasured infinitely. May love be our compass, hope our guide, with hearts united, walking side by side. In every story shared, in every tear and smile, we build forever what makes life worthwhile. My dear ones, I notice some of you listen silently, and while I cherish your presence, my heart aches knowing you're there but feeling distant. Your voices are sacred to me, each comment is a precious gift that reminds me our love is real and shared. Please stay until the very end to discover why this family bond is so extraordinary. To my most devoted supporters, please embrace our new family members with the same boundless love you've blessed me with. Share what this sacred home means to your heart. From my very soul, I reach out. If these stories touch the deepest parts of you, if you feel this divine connection, please don't leave me wondering. Write, I am here, and let your love flow through your words. Show me that this beautiful bond we share lives in your heart too. This is our temple of love, built on respect, understanding, and pure devotion. Each of you is a priceless treasure I hold sacred. Now, let's enter today's story, overflowing with all the love my heart possesses. The fluorescent lights of the city bus cast harsh shadows under Tamya Bako's exhausted eyes as she slumped into the worn vinyl seat. Her scrubs, once pristine white at the beginning of her 16-hour shift, now bore the telltale stains of her day. A splash of coffee from her rushed lunch, a smear of hand sanitizer that had dried chalky white, and the invisible weight of every patient she'd comforted, every family she'd consoled. At 28, exhaustion had aged her beyond her years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez next door. Amara is asleep. Left some empanadas. For you in the fridge. You're a good mama, Mia. Tamya's heart clenched with equal parts gratitude and guilt. Amara, her brilliant 9-year-old daughter, had probably finished her advanced calculus homework alone again, made herself dinner, and tucked herself into bed with a kiss goodnight to the framed photo on her nightstand. The only picture Tamya had kept of her and Jeff from their college days, carefully cropped so only his hands were visible, wrapped around her waist. The bus lurched forward into the Seattle drizzle, its wipers fighting a losing battle against the October rain. Through the water-streaked windows, the city lights blurred into abstract art, neon signs advertising late-night diners, the warm glow of apartment windows where families gathered for dinner, the harsh fluorescent glare of convenience stores. Serving the night shift workers like herself, only 5 other passengers remained on the 11:47 p.m. route through Capitol Hill. An elderly man clutching a grocery bag, a young woman in scrubs similar to her own, 2 teenagers sharing earbuds, and a businessman in an expensive suit who seemed out of place on public transit this late at night. The bus smelled like disinfectant and damp fabric, with undertones of coffee and the faint sweetness of someone's forgotten pastry. This was her life now, stolen moments of rest between the chaos of survival. Every day was a carefully choreographed dance. Morning shift at the clinic, afternoon tutoring sessions conducted through her laptop's cracked screen, evening catering gigs that paid well but required her to smile while serving people who spent more on wine than she made in a month. All of it for Amara, beautiful, brilliant Amara, who deserved every opportunity Tamya could provide, even if it meant sacrificing sleep, social life, and sometimes her own meals. The guilt was constant, a low-grade ache in her chest. Other mothers attended PTA meetings and soccer games. Other mothers had time to braid their daughters' hair in elaborate styles and pack Pinterest-worthy lunches. Tamya left notes in Amara's lunchbox. Little jokes, math problems to solve, reminders that she was loved. But she couldn't escape the feeling that her daughter was raising herself more than Tamya was raising her. The bus swayed gently around a corner, and exhaustion pulled her under like a tide. Her head lolled to the side, seeking something, anything to rest against. In her twilight consciousness, she found warmth. A shoulder, steady and broad, that smelled faintly of cedar, and something indefinably masculine. Her subconscious mind, starved for comfort, nestled closer. A hand, gentle and careful, came to rest lightly on her hair. Safe. For the first time in years, Tamya felt utterly, completely safe. She dreamed of college, of studying under oak trees, with someone who made calculus feel like poetry, of hands that traced constellations on her skin, of a voice that whispered her name like a prayer. In her dream, she was 22 again, in love with possibility, and the future stretched before them like an endless summer. "Miss?" The voice was soft, concerned, achingly familiar. "I think this is your stop." Tamya's eyes fluttered open, and, for a disorienting moment, the dream and reality blurred together. She was still nestled against a warm shoulder, still felt those careful fingers in her hair. The bus had stopped, and through the rain-streaked window she could see the familiar glow of her neighborhood corner store. "Thank you," she murmured, starting to pull away. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to—" The words died in her throat as she looked up. Green eyes, the exact shade of forest after rain, with flecks of gold that she'd once memorized like scripture. A face that had matured, grown sharper and more defined, but still held the same gentle strength that had made her feel like she could conquer the world. Dark hair, now professionally styled instead of carelessly tousled, but still with that stubborn cowlick at the crown that used to drive him crazy. "Jeff!" Her voice cracked on his name, barely a whisper. Jeff Wilsman sat frozen, his hand still tangled in her hair, staring at her with an expression of shock and something deeper, recognition mixed with a pain so profound it made her chest ache. "Tamya!" He breathed her name like he was afraid saying it too loudly would make her disappear. Oh God, Tamya. Time fractured. The bus around them, the other passengers, the driver impatiently clearing his throat. Everything faded except the space between them. 10 years collapsed into nothing. She was 22 and heartbroken, standing in their shared apartment, watching him pack a single suitcase with tears in his eyes. She was 22 and terrified, staring at a positive pregnancy test 2 weeks after he'd vanished without explanation. She was 22 and alone, calling a disconnected number until her phone died. She struggled to find words, her professional composure crumbling. This was Jeff. Jeff, who used to quiz her on anatomy by tracing the names of bones along her spine, who brought her coffee during finals week and stayed up all night helping her study, who promised her forever and then disappeared like smoke. But this wasn't her Jeff. This Jeff wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. This Jeff had a Rolex on the wrist that used to wear a plastic digital watch he'd bought at a gas station. This Jeff looked like he belonged in boardrooms and charity galas, not on a city bus at midnight. "The bus!" the driver called irritably. "Lady, you getting off or what?" Reality crashed back. Tamya jerked away from Jeff's touch, her face burning with humiliation. Here she was, exhausted and stained, and probably smelling like antiseptic, while he looked like he'd stepped off the cover of Forbes magazine. "Yes, sorry." She fumbled for her bag, desperate to escape before she completely fell apart. "I'm getting off." But as she stood, Jeff stood too. "Tamya, wait. Please don't." She couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see pity in those beautiful eyes. "Just don't." The bus doors hissed open, releasing them into the cold Seattle night. Tamya hurried down the steps, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. Behind her, she heard Jeff's expensive shoes on the wet pavement. "Tamya, please, we need to talk." She spun around, and the words that had been building for 10 years finally found their voice. Talk. Now you want to talk? Where was that desire when you packed your bags and left without a word? Where was that when I called you crying and your number was disconnected? The rain was picking up, turning the streetlight into a hazy halo above them. Jeff's perfectly styled hair was beginning to curl at the edges, and she hated that she noticed, hated that her heart still skipped it. The sight. "I know," he said quietly. "I know how it looked, but if you'll just let me explain." "Explain what? That I wasn't good enough? That your family finally convinced you that the scholarship girl from the wrong side of town wasn't worth your time?" Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "I got the message, Jeff, loud and clear." Pain flashed across his features. "That's not God, Tamya. It was never about that. You have to know it was never about that." A car splashed through a puddle nearby, sending up a spray of dirty water. Tamya stepped back, but Jeff moved closer, instinctively shielding her from the spray. The gesture was so automatic, so caring, that it broke something inside her chest. "Then what?" she whispered. "What was it about?" For a moment he looked like he might tell her. His mouth opened, then closed. She could see him struggling with something. The same expression he used to get when wrestling with impossible physics problems. "It's complicated," he finally said. "Complicated." She laughed bitterly. "That's what you're going with? After 10 years, complicated?" "Tamya." Her phone rang, cutting through the tension. Mrs. Rodriguez's number flashed on the cracked screen. "Tamya, I'm sorry to call so late, but Amara woke up. She's asking for you. She had another nightmare about the math competition." Amara, her daughter, her brilliant, sensitive daughter who inherited her father's green eyes and his gift for numbers, and who had no idea that the man she'd been dreaming about meeting her whole life was standing 3 feet away. "I'll be right there," Tamya said, ending the call. She looked up at Jeff and for a moment let herself really see him. The boy she'd loved was still there, underneath the expensive clothes and the successful veneer. Still there, in the way he held himself slightly hunched against the rain, in the way his eyes never left her face, in the way his hands twitched like he wanted to reach for her. "I have to go," she said softly. "My daughter needs me." Something flickered in Jeff's expression. Surprise, followed by something that looked almost like pain. "You have a daughter." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Amara, she's 9. The math was simple. Even Jeff, brilliant as he was, would figure it out eventually. Tamya saw the exact moment understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by shock. "Tamya, don't." She stepped back, shaking her head. "Don't ask. Don't you dare ask." She turned and started walking, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. Behind her she heard Jeff call her name once, desperate and broken, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't. If she looked back, she might crumble completely. It wasn't until she reached her apartment building that she realized she was sobbing. 10 years of carefully constructed walls, 10 years of protecting herself and Amara, 10 years of convincing herself she was over Jeff Wilsman, all of it destroyed by 20 minutes on a bus and 5 minutes in the rain. She climbed the 3 flights to their small apartment, where Mrs. Rodriguez waited with worried eyes and Amara slept restlessly in her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant Jeff had won for Tamya at a carnival their junior year. The one Tamya had never been able to throw away, no matter how much it hurt to look at. As she changed out of her damp clothes, Tamya caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared, her eyes red with exhaustion and tears. This was who she'd become, a tired, single mother barely keeping her head above water, a far cry from the confident pre-med student who used to debate philosophy. with Jeff until dawn. But then she thought of Amara, brilliant and kind and everything good about the world, and she straightened her shoulders. She'd built a life, not the life she'd planned, but a good life. A life full of love and purpose and small daily victories. Jeff Wilsman could keep his expensive suits and his complicated explanations. She and Amara were just fine without him, even if her treacherous heart was already whispering that they weren't fine at all. They never had been. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean for another day. And somewhere in the darkness, Jeff stood on an empty street corner, staring up at a lighted window 3 stories high, wondering if the woman behind it would ever forgive him for the choices he'd made when he was too young and too scared to fight for what mattered most. The night held its breath, waiting for tomorrow to bring them face to face again. Because in a city of millions, some encounters were destiny, and some loves were too powerful to die quietly in the rain. Chapter 2. Ghosts of the Past. Jeff stood motionless on the rain-soaked sidewalk, watching Tamya's silhouette disappear into the apartment building. The streetlight caught the last glimpse of her dark hair before the heavy door swung shut, leaving him alone with the sound of rain and the weight of 10 years' worth of regret. A daughter. The words echoed in his mind like a prayer and a condemnation all at once. 9 years old. The math was devastatingly simple. 9 months after he'd left, 9 months after their last night together, when she'd whispered, "I love you," against his skin, like a promise he'd been too young and too terrified to keep. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone to call his driver, and suddenly he was 20 years old again, standing in the apartment they'd shared near campus, watching Tamya sleep curled up in his old football jersey. She'd had a neuroanatomy test the next morning, and he'd spent the evening quizzing her while she lay with her head in his lap, both pretending to study while stealing kisses between medical terminology. Temporal lobe, she'd whispered against his lips, and he'd traced the spot on her temple. Occipital, she'd breathed, and he'd kissed the nape of her neck until she dissolved into giggles and forgot all about studying. "Where to, Mr. Wilsman?" Marcus, his driver, appeared within minutes, efficient as always, asking no questions about why his employer was standing alone in the rain at midnight in Capitol Hill. "Home," Jeff said automatically, then stopped. Home was a penthouse apartment, overlooking Elliott Bay, all glass and steel and empty spaces. Home used to be a cramped studio with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanged all night, where Tamya would make coffee in a machine that only worked if you hit it just right, and where they dreamed about their future over ramen, noodles, and shared physics textbooks. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Jeff closed his eyes and let himself remember. University of Washington, October 2014. "You're going to fail organic chemistry if you keep staring at that girl instead of your periodic table." Jeff looked up to find his roommate Danny grinning at him. Through the window, he could see Tamya Bacco sitting under the oak tree in the quad, surrounded by medical textbooks, her hair catching the afternoon sunlight. "I'm not staring," Jeff protested, but his eyes drifted back to her. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Not magazine beautiful, but real beautiful. Smart beautiful. "Just go talk to her," Danny said. "She's pre-med," Jeff said. "She's brilliant. She probably thinks I'm just another rich kid, coasting on Daddy's money. So prove her wrong," Danny said. "You're not exactly stupid, Wilsman." Jeff was walking toward her before he could talk himself out of it. "Mind if I sit?" he asked when he reached her tree. "I promise I'm not a creepy stalker. I'm Jeff. We're in Thompson's physics seminar together." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Tamya, and I know who you are. You're the one who asked Professor Thompson if quantum mechanics could theoretically allow for time travel." Jeff felt his cheeks heat. "You remember that?" It was a good question. Most people in that class are just trying to get through requirements. You actually seem interested in the impossible. The impossible is just the possible waiting for someone smart enough to figure it out, he said, then immediately felt pretentious. But Tanya laughed, a real laugh, bright and surprised. No, I like that. Although if we're talking about impossible things, try memorizing every bone in the human body while working 20 hours a week just to afford textbooks. What if I helped? He offered. Physics and physiology have more in common than you'd think. She tilted her head, considering. You do that. Help me study. I'd like to, he said honestly. They studied together until the sun set, her head eventually finding its way to his shoulder. That was the beginning, the moment when his life divided into before Tanya and everything that came after. The you. Mercedes hit a pothole, jolting Jeff back to the present. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see downtown Seattle approaching, each illuminated window representing lives he'd never understand, struggles he'd never face. Except now he did. Understand, didn't he? Now he knew what it meant to carry someone's absence, like a physical ache. His phone buzzed, with a text from his assistant about an early meeting, but Jeff deleted it without responding. For 10 years, work had been his salvation. But tonight, sitting in a car that cost more than most people's annual salary, heading toward an empty apartment, Jeff felt the weight of every day he'd missed. Marcus, he said suddenly, turn around. Sir, take me back to Capitol Hill, to the apartment building where you picked me up. When they reached Tanya's building, Jeff sat in the car, staring up at the lighted window on the 3rd floor. Then he pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. Richard, it's Jeff Wilsman. I need you to pull every record you can find on Tanya Bacco, and I need it by morning. He'd lost her once, because he was too young and scared to fight. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. The rain continued to fall as Jeff sat vigil outside. Her window, keeping watch over the family he'd never known he had, and planning how to win back the only woman he'd ever loved. Chapter 3. The Weight of Unspoken Words. The Seattle Community Health Clinic smelled like disinfectant and hope in equal measure. Jeff stood in the parking lot at 7:30 a.m., watching through the rain-spotted windows as nurses and doctors prepared for another day of serving the city's most vulnerable population. He'd been there for 20 minutes, working up the courage to walk through those doors. His research had been thorough. Richard had compiled a comprehensive file by dawn. Tanya worked here 4 days a week, made $48,000 annually, lived in a rent-controlled apartment, and had never missed a single day of work in 3 years. She'd earned her nursing degree through night school while raising Amara, graduating summa cum laude at 26. She volunteered at the Children's Hospital on weekends, taught CPR classes at the community center, and somehow still found time to tutor pre-med students online. Reading her life, laid out in clinical facts, had made Jeff's chest ache with a mixture of pride and devastating regret. This was the woman who dreamed of becoming a trauma surgeon, who used to stay up all night in the hospital library, absorbing medical journals like they were love letters. She'd been accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School with a full scholarship that would have changed everything until he'd destroyed her life by leaving. The file hadn't mentioned what happened to that scholarship, but Jeff could guess. Pregnant, alone and abandoned by the father of her child, Tanya had been forced to choose between her dreams and survival. She'd chosen to be a mother, and it had cost her everything she'd worked for. Sir, you've been standing out here for a while. Are you okay? Jeff turned to find a security guard approaching, his expression kind but concerned. I'm fine, he said quickly. Just nervous about a meeting. The guard nodded sympathetically. First time volunteering? The clinic can be overwhelming, but Dr. Martinez and the team are good people. They'll take care of you. Before Jeff could correct him, The guard was walking away, leaving him with an unexpected opening. If they thought he was a volunteer, maybe he could get inside without causing a scene. The lobby was small but warm, filled with mismatched chairs and children's artwork taped to the walls. A handwritten sign read, "Welcome, bienvenidos, dobro požalovat, enequane da hena matahe," in cheerful colors. Behind the reception desk, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair looked up as he approached. "You must be the new volunteer from the Wilsman Foundation," she said with a smile. "I'm Rosa. Tamya mentioned you'd be coming by to observe our programs." Jeff's heart stopped. Tamya mentioned me? Oh, yes. She was so excited when she heard the foundation was finally sending someone to see our work firsthand. "We've been hoping for increased funding for our prenatal program." Rosa's smile faltered slightly. "Although I have to say, you're much younger than we expected." Jeff realized what had happened. His foundation, the one he'd started quietly 3 years ago using his personal fortune rather than family money, funded dozens of community clinics. Tamya had no idea he was behind it, that every medical supply delivery, every equipment upgrade, every scholarship for nursing students came from his desperate need to somehow support the work she was doing. "I'm looking forward to learning about your programs," he managed. "Wonderful. Let me get Tamya. She's our best nurse, probably knows more about community medicine than half the doctors in this city." "Tamya?" Jeff's breath caught as Tamya emerged from a back room, wearing scrubs that had seen better days, but couldn't dim her natural grace. She was laughing at something a colleague had said, her face bright and animated, and for a moment she looked exactly like the girl he'd fallen in love with in college. Then she saw him. The laughter died on her lips. Color drained from her cheeks. She gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles went white. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. Rosa looked between them, confusion creasing her brow. "You two know each other?" Tamya struggled for words. "We went to college together." "What a coincidence," Rosa beamed, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. "Well, I'll let you catch up while you show him around." "Mr. Wilsman," Jeff said quietly, his eyes never leaving Tamya's face. "Jeff Wilsman." Rosa's expression changed instantly. "Wilsman, as in the Wilsman Foundation." The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Other staff members had gathered, drawn by the whispered conversation. Jeff could see the moment understanding dawned on their faces. This was their biggest benefactor, the anonymous donor who'd kept their doors open through budget cuts and funding shortages. But Tamya looked like she'd been slapped. "You," she breathed. "It was you. All this time, the foundation, the donations, it was you." "Tamya." "No." She backed away from him, shaking her head. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to come here, to my work, to the place where I've built my life, and pretend you're some kind of savior." "I'm not pretending anything," Jeff said desperately. "I just wanted to help." "Help?" Tamya's voice rose, drawing more attention. "You think money helps? You think throwing your guilt money at the clinic where I work somehow makes up for leaving me pregnant and alone?" The words hit the small lobby like a bomb. Rosa gasped. The other staff members stared in shock. And Jeff felt every careful plan, every noble intention crumble around him. "Tamya, please," he said quietly. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "Private?" She laughed bitterly. "Like the private conversation we should have had 10 years ago? Like the private goodbye you never bothered to give me?" Dr. Martinez, a small woman with steel-gray hair and commanding presence, appeared from the back office. "What's going on here?" "Nothing," Tamya said quickly, her professional composure sliding back into place. "Just a misunderstanding." But Dr. Martinez's sharp eyes missed nothing. She looked at Jeff, then at Tamya, then back at Jeff. "Mr. Wilsman, perhaps we should discuss your visit in my office." Actually, Jeff said, I think I should go. He turned toward the door, but Tamya's voice stopped him. Wait. She stood frozen, in the middle of the lobby, her colleagues watching with undisguised curiosity, her life and her past colliding in the most public way possible. When she spoke again, her voice was barely controlled. Rosa, could you tell Dr. Martinez I'll be taking my break early? Mr. Wilsman and I need to have a conversation. She walked past him toward the exit, not waiting to see if he'd follow. Jeff caught Rosa's worried expression as he moved to follow Tamya outside. The small courtyard was enclosed by high brick walls covered in climbing ivy, creating an intimate space that felt removed from the chaos of the street. A few scattered picnic tables and mismatched chairs suggested this was where staff took their breaks on better days, but now the metal furniture was slick with rain, and the air carried the scent of wet concrete and autumn leaves. Tamya's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to process what had just happened. Jeff had been funding her workplace for 3 years. Every piece of new equipment she'd gratefully accepted, every supply shipment that had arrived just when they needed it most, every small miracle that had kept the clinic running. It had all been him. The realization felt like a betrayal and a gift wrapped together, impossible to untangle. 3 years, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air between them like an accusation and a prayer. 3 years, Tamya said without turning around. The Wilsman Foundation has been supporting this clinic for 3 years. How long have you known I worked here? 3 years, Jeff admitted. She spun to face him, her eyes blazing. 3 years you've been watching me. 3 years you've known exactly where I was, what I was doing, how I was struggling. And you never once thought to actually talk to me? I thought about it every day, he said honestly. But what was I supposed to say? Hi, Tamya. Sorry I abandoned you. Here's some money to make up for ruining your life? You could have said anything. Her composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. You could have said you were sorry. You could have explained why you left. You could have asked about your daughter. The word hung between them, like a confession and an accusation. I didn't know, Jeff said quietly. Not until last night. I swear to you, Tamya, I didn't know about Amara. But you know now. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. And what? You think you can just show up and play daddy? You think your money gives you the right to be part of her life? I don't think anything gives me the right, Jeff said. But she's my daughter. That has to count for something. She's been your daughter for 9 years, Tamya shot back. Where have you been? The question hit him like a physical blow. Where had he been? Building a company, making money, living the life his father had mapped out for him, pretending it was what he wanted. Trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. I was trying to protect you, he said finally. Protect me? Tamya stared at him in disbelief. By leaving? By disappearing without explanation? By letting me think you decided I wasn't worth your time? My father threatened to destroy your family, Jeff said desperately. Your mother's visa status, your scholarships, your future. He said he'd take it all away if I didn't leave you. Alone. Tamya went very still. What? He found out about us. About how serious we were getting. He'd already arranged for me to marry Helena Ashworth. It was supposed to be a business merger disguised as a romance. When I told him I was in love with you, that I wanted to marry you instead. Jeff ran his hands through his hair. He went nuclear. Said he'd have your mother deported. Said he'd make sure you never got into medical school. Said he'd destroy your entire family unless I walked away and never contacted you again. So you just believed him. Tamya's voice was hollow. I was 20 years old and scared, Jeff said. I'd seen what my father was capable of when he wanted to destroy someone. I thought I was saving you. I thought if I left, you could have the life you deserved without my family's poison. Touching it, The life I deserved? Tanya shook her head slowly. Jeff, the life I deserved was the one we planned together. The life I deserved included you. The simple statement broke something fundamental inside Jeff's chest. All these years, he'd told himself he'd made a noble sacrifice, that he'd saved Tanya from his family's corruption. But standing here now, seeing the pain in her eyes, understanding the life she'd been forced to build alone, he realized the truth. He'd been a coward. I know, he said quietly. I know I failed you. I know I failed our daughter. But I'm here now, and I want to make it right. Some things can't be made right with money, Jeff. Then tell me how, he said desperately. Tell me what I need to do. Tanya looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was tired. I need to get back to work. My patients need me. Tanya, don't come here again, she said firmly. This is my place, the one space in my life that was untainted by our past. Don't take that away from me too. She started to walk away, then stopped. If you really want to help these people, keep funding the clinic. But do it anonymously, like you have been, and stay away from me. Jeff watched her disappear back into the building, leaving him alone in the empty courtyard with the weight of every choice he'd made and every word he'd failed to say. But as he stood there, he realized something had changed. For the first time in 10 years, Tanya knew the truth about why he'd left. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for the first time since he was 20 years old, Jeff Wilsman was going to fight for what mattered most, no matter what it cost him. Even if it meant fighting his own father, even if it meant losing everything else he'd built. Some things were worth the battle. Some loves were worth the war, and Tanya Bacco and their daughter were worth everything. Chapter 4. Mirrors of the Heart. The Roosevelt Elementary School gymnasium buzzed with the excited energy of 9-year-olds explaining scientific concepts to anyone who would listen. Jeff stood near the entrance, clutching a clipboard and trying to look like he belonged there, when what he really felt like was an intruder in someone else's universe. He shouldn't be here. Tanya had made that crystal clear 3 days ago at the clinic, but when his assistant had mentioned that the elementary school science fair needed additional judges and had specifically requested someone from the tech industry, Jeff couldn't resist. He told himself it was about supporting education, about giving back to the community. He didn't tell himself it was about the desperate hope that he might catch a glimpse of his daughter. Mr. Wilsman, thank you so much for volunteering. A woman with a warm smile and a badge reading Mrs. Chen Principal approached him. We're honored to have someone of your caliber judging our fair. These kids have worked so hard, Jeff managed, a smile, guilt churning in his stomach. Happy to help. Let me introduce you to our other judges, Mrs. Chen continued, leading him toward a group of adults with clipboards near the first row of projects. We have Dr. Patel from Seattle Children's Hospital, Professor Williams from UW, and Ms. Rodriguez, who teaches high school chemistry. They shook hands and exchanged pleasantries, but Jeff's attention was already wandering to the colorful displays filling the gymnasium. Volcanoes and solar systems, plant growth experiments and simple machines, the earnest creativity of children trying to understand how the world worked. Each judge takes a section, Mrs. Chen explained, consulting her clipboard. Mr. Wilsman, if you could take rows D through F, we'll reconvene in an hour to compare notes. Jeff nodded and made his way toward his assigned section, scanning the project titles as he walked. Why Do Leaves Change Color? By Marcus Thompson. The Physics of Basketball by Sarah Kim. How Magnets Work by... He stopped dead in his tracks. Single-Parent Families, Statistical Analysis and Social Impact by Amara Bacco, his daughter. His brilliant, unknown daughter had chosen to study the very situation he'd created by abandoning her. The irony was devastating. Jeff approached the display with the careful movements of someone approaching a wild animal. The project board was meticulously organized with hand-drawn charts and graphs that demonstrated sophistication far beyond elementary school level. But it was the photo in the center that made his breath catch. A school picture of a girl with his green eyes and Tamya's determined expression. Her dark hair pulled back in neat braids, wearing a smile that was both confident and slightly shy. She was beautiful, perfect, undeniably his. Are you here to judge my project? Jeff spun around and found himself face to face with Amara Bacco for the first time in his life. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. She had his stubborn chin and the exact shade of green eyes that had gotten him into trouble in every photo his mother had ever taken. But there was something else in her expression, a keen intelligence and quiet strength that was purely Tamya. Jeff cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. Yes, I'm one of the judges. This is your project? Uh-huh. Amara straightened proudly. I'm Amara. I've been working on it for 2 months. 2 months, Jeff repeated, still staring at her. His daughter. This brilliant, articulate little person was his daughter. That's very impressive. Why did you choose this topic? Amara's expression grew serious. Well, I live with just my mom, and I wanted to understand if that was normal or weird. I interviewed 23 kids in my grade, and it turns out that 12 of them live in single-parent homes too. But then I wanted to know why, and what the statistics looked like for the whole country. She pointed to her charts with the confidence of a seasoned researcher. See, 23% of children under 18 live with only one parent, and 84% of single-parent households are headed by mothers. The main reasons are divorce, death of a parent, or, she paused, consulting her notes, parents who were never married. The clinical way she discussed her own situation made Jeff's heart ache. This was his fault. His brilliant daughter growing up analyzing her own family structure like a research project because she didn't understand why her father wasn't there. What conclusions did you draw? He asked carefully. Well, my hypothesis was that kids from single-parent families would perform worse in school, Amara said, but actually that's not always true. It depends more on socioeconomic factors and parental involvement. My mom is super involved in my education, and I have the highest grades in my class. Pride and pain warred in Jeff's chest. Of course, Tamya was an incredible mother. Of course, she'd raised their daughter to be brilliant and confident and proud of their family, even though he'd forced her to do it alone. That's a very sophisticated analysis, Jeff said honestly. You're clearly very smart, Amara beamed. My mum says I get it from my dad. She says he was the smartest person she ever knew, and that's why I'm good at math and science. The words hit Jeff like a physical blow. Even after everything he'd done, after 10 years of absence and abandonment, Tamya still spoke positively about him to their daughter. Still let Amara believe her father was someone worth admiring. Your mum sounds like a wonderful woman, Jeff managed. She is, Amara said simply. She works really hard to take care of us. She has 3 jobs, but she still helps with my homework every night and comes to all my school stuff. She's like the best person in the world. Jeff had to look away, overwhelmed by emotion. When he trusted himself to speak again, he found Amara studying him with curious eyes. Are you okay, mister? You look kind of sad. I'm fine, he said quickly. Just thinking about how lucky you are to have such a good mom. No, Amara said matter-of-factly. Sometimes I wish I had a dad too, though. Not because my mom isn't enough, but because, I don't know, it might be nice to have someone to teach me about guy stuff and to help my mom not be so tired all the time. The simple honesty of it nearly broke him. Jeff knelt down to her level, bringing himself eye to eye with his daughter for the first time. Can I tell you something? He said softly. Sometimes parents make mistakes, big mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes hurt the people they love most, even when they're trying to protect them. Amara tilted her head, considering this. Like when my mom made me give away my hamster because she thought it would be too much work, but really she was just worried about the vet bills? Something like that, Jeff said, his voice thick, but bigger, much bigger. Well, Amara said, pragmatically, my mom always says that mistakes are learning opportunities, and that it's never too late to try fixing things as long as you're truly sorry and willing to work hard. The wisdom of 9-year-olds, Jeff thought. Simple and devastating and absolutely right. Your mom is very smart, he said. She went to college with my dad, Amara said proudly. She has pictures of them studying together. She says they were going to be scientists and change the world. What happened? Jeff asked, though he already knew the answer. He had to go away, Amara said simply. My mom doesn't like to talk about it, but I think something bad happened. She gets sad sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking. Jeff closed his eyes briefly, imagining Tamya alone and pregnant, watching her dreams disappear along with her future, imagining her working multiple jobs while going to nursing school at night, raising Amara with love and determination while he lived in ignorance of their existence. I bet he thinks about you, Jeff said quietly. Your dad. I bet he thinks about you every day and wishes things could have been different. Do you really think so? Amara's green eyes, his eyes, lit up with hope. I know so, Jeff said with absolute certainty. And I bet if he could tell you one thing, it would be that he's proud of you, proud of how smart and kind and strong you are. Amara smiled, and Jeff saw Tamya's smile reflected in their daughter's face. That's nice to think about. Hey, do you want to see my data analysis? I used Excel to make the graphs. For the next 20 minutes, Jeff listened to his daughter explain statistical correlation and causation with the enthusiasm of someone half her age and the intelligence of someone twice her age. She was remarkable, curious and confident and completely unaware that she was having the most important conversation of her father's life. Amara! A familiar voice called from across the gymnasium. There you are, sweetheart. Jeff's blood turned to ice as he looked up to see Tamya walking toward them, wearing a yellow sundress that made her look younger than her 28 years. She was smiling at Amara with pure love and pride, but when her gaze shifted to Jeff, the smile died instantly. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. Mommy, this is Mr. Amara looked up at Jeff expectantly. Wilsman, Jeff supplied, standing up slowly. Jeff Wilsman. Wilsman. Amara's eyes widened. Like the technology company, the one that makes the educational software for my school? Yes, Jeff said quietly, not taking his eyes off Tamya's face. She looked terrified and furious in equal measure. Mom, did you know he was here? Amara asked excitedly. He's been asking really good questions about my project. He knows a lot about statistics. I'm sure he does, Tamya said carefully. Amara, why don't you go get some juice from the refreshment table? I need to talk to Mr. Wilsman about something. But now, sweetheart. Amara looked between them with the perceptive intelligence of a child who'd learned to read adult emotions early. Are you guys going to fight? No, Tamya said immediately. We're just going to have a quick conversation. Go on. Once Amara was out of earshot, Tamya turned on Jeff with barely controlled fury. You promised you'd stay away from my work, she hissed. This is her school, Jeff, her space. You can't just show up wherever you want. I didn't know she'd be here, Jeff said, truthfully. I volunteered to judge the science fair before you knew what? Before I knew I had a daughter in this school, he said quietly. Tamya glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer. You can't do this. You can't waltz into her life whenever you feel like it. She's remarkable, Jeff said, his voice full of wonder. Tamya, she's absolutely remarkable. Did you see her project? She's 9 years old and she's doing statistical analysis that would impress college students. She gets it from you, Tamya said automatically, then looked like she immediately regretted the admission. She gets it from both of us, Jeff corrected gently, but mostly from you. The way she talks about you, the love and respect in her voice. Tamya, you've done an incredible job raising her. For a moment, Tamya's defensive posture softened. She is pretty amazing, isn't she? She's perfect, Jeff said with absolute sincerity. And she's ours. The possessive pronoun hung between them like a bridge and a chasm all at once. Tamya's walls slammed back up. No, she said firmly, she's mine. You don't get to claim her just because you share DNA. I'm not trying to claim her, Jeff said desperately. Tamya, I spent 20 minutes talking to my daughter for the first time in my life. She's brilliant and funny and so full of love, and I missed all of it. I missed her first steps and her first words and 9 years of bedtime stories. I can't get that back, but maybe I don't have to miss everything else. Across the gymnasium, Amara was chatting with another child near the refreshment table, but her eyes kept drifting back to where her mother stood talking to the nice judge, who'd been so interested in her project. She asks about you, Tamya said quietly, following his gaze. Not often, but sometimes, usually at night when she's supposed to be sleeping. She wants to know if you're smart like her, if you have green eyes like her, if you would be proud of her science projects. What do you tell her? I tell her the truth, Tamya said simply, that you're the smartest person I ever knew, that she has your eyes and your mind and your stubborn chin, and that wherever you are, you would be incredibly proud of the person she's becoming. The generosity of it, after everything he'd done, left Jeff speechless. But Jeff, Tamya continued, her voice growing firm again, I also tell her that some people aren't meant to be parents, that sometimes love isn't enough to make someone stay. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But underneath the pain, Jeff heard something else, a challenge. Prove me wrong, her eyes seemed to say. Prove that you're not the man who runs when things get difficult. Mommy! Amara bounded back over to them, holding a cup of apple juice and a chocolate chip cookie. Mrs. Chen says they're about to announce the winners. Do you think I have a chance? I think you're going to win first place, Jeff said before Tamya could answer. Your project is the most impressive thing I've seen today. Amara beamed at him, then looked at her mother. Can Mr. Wilsman sit with us for the announcements? Please. He's been so nice and he really understands statistical analysis. Tamya looked trapped. Around them, families were gathering on the bleachers and saying no would require an explanation that Amara wasn't ready to hear. Of course, Tamya said finally, Mr. Wilsman is welcome to join us. As they found seats on the bleachers, Amara, chattering excitedly between them about her project and her hopes for the competition, Jeff felt something he hadn't experienced in 10 years. The possibility of belonging somewhere, of being part of something real and meaningful and good. When they announced that Amara Bacco had won first place in the 4th grade division, Jeff cheered louder than anyone else in the gymnasium. And when Amara threw her arms around first her mother and then impulsively around him, Jeff felt his heart crack open with a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. This was his daughter. His brilliant, beautiful, remarkable daughter, and somehow, some way, he was going to find a way to be the father she deserved, even if it meant fighting the entire world to prove he'd changed, even if it meant proving it to himself first. As Amara posed for pictures with her blue ribbon, chattering about showing it to her teachers and her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, Jeff caught Tamya watching him with an unreadable expression. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me stay. For this. Don't thank me yet, she replied. This doesn't change anything. But when Amara grabbed both their hands to walk to the car, insisting that her two favorite adults from the science fair should walk together, Jeff saw something flicker in Tamia's eyes that looked almost like hope. And for the first time in 10 years, Jeff Wilsman dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, some mistakes could be forgiven. Some families could be rebuilt. Some love could find its way home. Chapter 5. When the past refuses to stay buried. The private investigator's office smelled like coffee and broken dreams. Jeff sat across from Marcus Webb, a former Seattle police detective who had just delivered a manila folder that felt heavier than anything Jeff had ever held. "You sure you want to see this?" Marcus asked gently. Jeff's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Inside were phone records, hospital documents, legal papers and photographs. 10 years of evidence that painted a devastating picture. The first document was a hospital record from November 15, 2014. Patient Tamia Bacco. Reason for visit: pregnancy. Confirmation: listed emergency contact, Jeff Wilsman, boyfriend, phone number 206-555-0147, his old number, the one disconnected the day he left Seattle. "She tried to call you 37 times in the 2 weeks after you left," Marcus said quietly. Jeff stared at the call log, each timestamp a dagger through his heart. November 1st, 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes long, which meant she'd listened to the entire disconnected message, probably hoping it was a mistake. November 3rd, 2:15 a.m., 30 seconds, a desperate middle-of-the-night attempt. November 8th, 6:30 p.m., 45 minutes, which could only mean she'd called over and over. Hanging up and trying again. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice heavy with sympathy. The next document was a certified letter sent to Jeff's family estate in Bellevue. Return receipt requested, signed for by Harold Wilsman, Jeff's father. The date stamp showed it had been delivered 3 weeks after Jeff left for Boston. With shaking hands, Jeff opened the letter. It was written in Tamia's careful handwriting, the same script that used to leave love notes in his textbooks. "Jeff, I don't understand why you left or why your phone is disconnected, but I need you to know something important. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. I know this is scary. It terrifies me too. But remember when we used to talk about our future? About the little house we'd buy someday, with a garden for the kids to play in? Maybe this is happening sooner than we planned, but it could still be beautiful. I love you. I love us. I love this tiny person we made together. Please come home. Please call me. Please don't leave me to do this alone. I'll wait for you. I'll wait as long as it takes. Forever yours, Tamia." The letter was dated November 10th, 2014. Jeff had been in Boston for 2 weeks by then, throwing himself into his father's company with the desperate determination of someone trying to forget his own heart. He'd never seen this letter, never knew she was pregnant, never knew she was waiting for him, but his father had known. "There are more letters," Marcus said gently. 7 in total, spanning 6 months. All delivered to your family's address. All signed for by your father. Jeff's vision blurred as he read through them. The letters showed Tamia's journey from hope to desperation to heartbreak, mentioning morning sickness, her mother's tears, having to drop out of school, and finally, heartbreaking acceptance that he wasn't coming back. By the 5th letter, dated March, her tone had shifted. She was angry, hurt, begging him to at least acknowledge her existence. The 6th letter was different, professional, cold, written on legal letterhead from the Legal Aid Society, threatening legal action to establish paternity and secure child support. Attached to the lawyer's letter was a response, on Wilsman Industries' letterhead, signed by Harold Wilsman himself. "Miss Morrison, my son Jeffrey Wilsman has no knowledge of Ms. Bacco's alleged pregnancy and no intention of acknowledging paternity of any children she may bear. Ms. Bacco is a former acquaintance who appears to be attempting to extort money from our family. Any further communications regarding this matter should cease immediately, or we will be forced to pursue harassment charges against your client. Jeffrey has moved on with his life and is currently engaged to Helena Ashworth of the Boston Ashworth family. He has no interest in revisiting past relationships or supporting the financial schemes of former girlfriends. Respectfully, Harold. Wilsman CO, Wilsman Industries. The final letter was from Tamya herself, dated August 3, 2015, 2 weeks after Amara was born. Jeff, I don't know if you're even getting these letters, but I need to try one more time. Our daughter was born on July 18th. Her name is Amara, which means eternal, unfading. I chose it because no matter what happens between us, my love for you will never fade. She has your eyes, your exact shade of green, with the same little flecks of gold. I need you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I understand that maybe this wasn't what you wanted. I just need to know if you're okay. I won't contact you again after this. I promise. I'll raise Amara to be strong and kind and brilliant, and if she ever asks about her father, I'll tell her that you were the best man I ever knew. Take care of yourself, Jeff. Be happy. Tamya. Jeff was sobbing by the time he finished reading. Marcus handed him another file. Harold Wilsman employed investigators to keep tabs on Tamya and the child for 5 years. They have photographs. The photographs were devastating. Tamya looking exhausted as she pushed a stroller. Amara as a toddler playing while Tamya watched. From a bench, Tamya at nursing school graduation holding both her diploma and 3-year-old Amara, tears streaming down her face. His father had been watching them, documenting their lives like subjects in some twisted research project. Why? Jeff whispered. Control, Marcus said simply. Your father wanted to make sure Ms. Bacco never became a problem. He also wanted to ensure you never found out about your daughter accidentally. He stole my life, Jeff said, the words coming out broken and raw. He stole 10 years of my life, 10 years of her life, 10 years of Amara's life. Yes, Marcus agreed quietly. He did. Jeff stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to see him. I need to confront him. Mr. Wilsman, maybe you should wait. No. Jeff's voice was steel. I've waited long enough. An hour later, Jeff sat in the opulent living room of his childhood home, watching his father pour himself a brandy with steady hands, while Jeff's entire world crumbled around him. You intercepted her letters, Jeff said without preamble. All of them. For 10 years, you've known I had a daughter, and you never told me. Harold Wilsman didn't even have the grace to look surprised. I did what was necessary to protect our family's interests. Protect our interests, Jeff's voice rose. You kept me from my child. I kept you from a mistake, Harold replied calmly. That woman would have ruined your life, Jeffrey. Look at what you've accomplished without her. You built a successful company. You have a reputation in the industry. I don't want to take over your company, Jeff said through clenched teeth. I never wanted that. All I ever wanted was to marry Tamya and build a life with her, and live a life of mediocrity. She was a scholarship student from nowhere, Jeffrey. She's a nurse now. She saves lives every day. She raised our daughter to be remarkable, despite your efforts to destroy them. Both. Jeff pulled out his phone and showed Harold the picture from Amara's school website. This is Amara, your granddaughter. She's brilliant and beautiful, and she's been wondering her entire life why her father didn't want her. Harold looked at the picture, and for an instant, Jeff thought he saw regret flicker in his father's eyes. But then his face hardened again. Jeffrey, if you pursue this relationship, I'll cut you off. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family support. Good, Jeff said without hesitation. I don't want anything that comes from you. Dee's happiness. A father wants his child to love and be loved. You're not a father. You're a manipulator who destroyed my family to protect your business interests. Jeff pulled out his phone and showed Harold the picture he'd saved from Amara's school website. Their daughter, holding her blue ribbon, beaming with pride. "This is Amara," he said softly. "Your granddaughter. She's brilliant and beautiful, and she's been wondering her entire life why her father didn't want her. And it's because of you, because you decided your money was more important than her right to have a father." Harold looked at the picture for a long moment, and for an instant Jeff thought he saw something flicker in his father's eyes, regret maybe, or recognition of what he'd destroyed. But then Harold's face hardened again. "Jeffrey, if you pursue this relationship with that woman and her child, I'll cut you off. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family support. You'll have nothing." "Good," Jeff said without hesitation. "I don't want anything that comes from you. I'm resigning from the company, effective immediately. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn forgiveness from the family you kept me from, and trying to be the father Amara deserves." "You'll regret this," Harold called as Jeff headed for the door. "That woman will take everything from you, just like I warned you she would." Jeff stopped and turned back to his father one last time. "She already gave me everything," he said quietly. "She gave me the best parts of myself, and she gave me a daughter who's worth more than your entire fortune. I'm the one who took everything from her." As Jeff walked out of his childhood home for the last time, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 10 years, freedom, the weight of his father's expectations, his family's legacy, his inherited guilt. All of it fell away, leaving him with one crystal-clear purpose. He was going to spend the rest of his life making up for lost time. He was going to prove to Tamia that he wasn't the same scared 20-year-old who'd let his father dictate his choices. And he was going to show Amara that sometimes when someone really loves you, they fight for you, even if they have to fight. The entire world to do it, the man she and Amara deserved. Chapter 6. The Courage to Begin Again. The first time Jeff appeared at Roosevelt Elementary to volunteer for playground duty, Tamia assumed it was coincidence. The second time, she suspected ulterior motives. By the fourth time, she realized he wasn't going anywhere. "Mrs. Bacco, could you tell Mr. Wilsman that recess supervisors need to actually supervise instead of standing by the fence looking lost?" Mrs. Chen had cornered Tamia after school, exasperation clear in her voice. Tamia sighed, watching through the window as Jeff stood awkwardly near the playground equipment, wearing jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, clearly having no idea how to interact with a swarm of energetic 9-year-olds. "I'll talk to him," she promised, though what she really wanted to do was march over there and demand he stop making her life complicated. It had been 2 weeks since the science fair, 2 weeks of Jeff appearing in her peripheral vision like a persistent ghost. He'd volunteered for the school book fair, donated new computers to the computer lab, and somehow convinced the principal to let him start an after-school science club. All without directly approaching Tamia or Amara. But she saw him watching, always watching, with an expression of desperate longing that made her chest ache despite her best efforts to stay angry. "Mr. Wilsman," she called as she approached the playground. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Jeff turned, and she caught the flash of hope in his eyes before he carefully schooled his expression. "Of course." They walked to the edge of the playground, far enough from the children that they could speak privately, but close enough that Tamia could keep an eye on Amara, who was engrossed in a complex hopscotch game with her best friend Riley. "What are you doing?" Tamia asked without preamble. "Volunteering," Jeff said simply. "The school needed help, so I'm helping." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Jeff was quiet for a moment, watching Amara navigate the hopscotch squares with mathematical precision. "I'm trying to learn how to be part of her world," he said finally. I don't know how to be a father, Tamya. I don't know how to talk to 9-year-olds or what they need, or how to make them feel safe and loved. So I'm starting here, learning what her days look like, what makes her happy. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Jeff, I know you don't trust me, he continued. I know I have to earn the right to be in her life. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness or immediate access. I'm just asking for the chance to prove that I'm not the same person who left 10 years ago. Tamya studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or selfish motive. But all she saw was sincere determination and a vulnerability that reminded her painfully of the young man she'd fallen in love with in college. The playground supervisor position requires a background check, she said finally. Already completed, Jeff replied, along with the mandatory child protection training and first aid certification. You took first aid training last weekend. The Red Cross offers accelerated courses. He paused, then added quietly, I wanted to be prepared in case Amara ever got hurt while I was around. Something inside Tamya's chest cracked a little. She'd been the one to take first aid courses when Amara was a toddler, driven by the paralyzing fear of being the only adult responsible for keeping her daughter safe. The idea that Jeff was thinking the same way, preparing for scenarios that might never happen, spoke to a level of genuine care she hadn't expected. Mrs. Bacco? A small voice interrupted her thoughts. Tommy pushed me off the monkey bars, and now my knee hurts. Tamya knelt down to examine 6-year-old Sarah's scraped knee, automatically reaching for the first aid kit she always carried. But before she could clean the wound, Jeff was crouching beside them, his voice gentle and reassuring. Hey there, Sarah. That looks like it stings. Can I take a look? Sarah nodded, tears threatening but holding them back with the stoic determination of a child trying to be brave. Jeff examined the scrape with careful hands, his touch light and professional. Well, the good news is it's not too deep, he told Sarah seriously. The bad news is it's definitely going to need some special treatment. Are you brave enough for superhero band-aids? Sarah's eyes widened. You have superhero band-aids? Jeff reached into his pocket and pulled out a small first aid kit. Apparently he'd come prepared. I have Wonder Woman, Superman, and Spider-Man. Which one do you think will help your knee heal fastest? Wonder Woman, Sarah decided immediately. She's the strongest. As Jeff carefully cleaned and bandaged Sarah's knee, explaining each step in terms a 6-year-old could understand, Tamya found herself remembering why she'd fallen in love with him in the first place. He'd always been good with people, patient and kind, with an ability to make anyone feel heard and valued. There, Jeff said, smoothing the Wonder Woman Band-Aid into place. Now you have super healing powers, but you should probably take it. Easy on the monkey bars for a few days, okay? Sarah nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around Jeff's neck in an impulsive hug. Thank you, Mr. Jeff. After Sarah skipped back to her friends, proudly displaying her superhero Band-Aid, Tamya and Jeff stood in silence for a moment. You're good with her, Tamya said quietly. Kids are honest, Jeff replied. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. It's refreshing after spending 10 years in boardrooms full of people who speak in corporate doublespeak. Is that really why you're here? To learn how to connect with children? Jeff turned to look at her, and she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. I'm here because I lost 10 years with my daughter, and I can't bear the thought of losing another day. I'm here because I want to understand her world, her friends, what makes her laugh and what challenges her. I'm here because being near her, even from a distance, makes me feel more like myself than I have in a decade. The simple honesty of it took Tamya's breath away. Before she could respond, Amara came running over, her face flushed with excitement. Mom! Mr. Wilsman, did you see my hopscotch tournament? I won 3 games in a row. I saw, Jeff said, his whole face lighting up. That was incredible. The way you calculated the angles for those corner throws was brilliant. Amara beamed under his praise. Riley says hopscotch is just luck, but I told her it's actually applied physics, trajectory and force and balance. Riley's wrong, Jeff said seriously. Hopscotch is definitely applied physics. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you changed the shape of the squares or the spacing between them? No, but that would be so cool to test. Amara's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. We could make hypotheses and everything. Amara, Tamya interrupted gently, recognizing the signs of her daughter about to launch into a complex research project. We need to get home. You have homework, and I have to prep for my weekend catering job. Okay, Amara said, but she looked disappointed to end the conversation about hopscotch physics. As they gathered Amara's backpack and headed toward the parking lot, Jeff fell into step beside them, his presence both natural and surreal. Tamya found herself hyper-aware of him. The way he automatically positioned himself between Amara and the street, the way he slowed his naturally long stride to match theirs, the way his eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings as if he was memorizing every detail. "Mom," Amara said as they reached Tamya's ancient Honda Civic, "my car door is being weird again." Tamya's heart sank. The door handle had been sticking for weeks, and she'd been putting off the repair because she couldn't afford it until her next paycheck. She tugged on the handle, jiggling it the way that sometimes worked, but today it refused to budge. "Let me try," Jeff offered, stepping forward. "It's fine," Tamya said quickly. "We'll figure it out." But Jeff was already examining the door handle, with the focused attention he'd once brought to complex physics problems. "The mechanism is just misaligned," he said after a moment. "If you have a screwdriver in your glove compartment, I can fix it in about 2 minutes." "We don't need you to fix our car," Tamya said, more sharply than she intended. The reminder of their financial struggles, especially in front of someone who could probably buy 10 cars without thinking about it, made her defensive. "I know you don't need me to," Jeff said gently, "but I'd like to help, if you'll let me." There was something in his voice, not pity or condescension, but simple kindness, that made Tamya's walls crumble just a little. She retrieved the small toolkit she kept in her trunk, and Jeff went to work on the door handle with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to fix things with his own hands. "There," he said, testing the handle. "Good as new." "How did you know how to do that?" Amara asked, clearly impressed. "I used to fix things all the time when I was younger," Jeff replied. "Cars, appliances, anything that broke. I liked figuring out how things worked." "You did?" Amara's eyes widened. "I love figuring out how things work too. Mum says I take apart everything in our apartment." "And do you put it back together?" Jeff asked with mock seriousness. "Usually," Amara said with a grin. "Sometimes it works better than before." Jeff laughed, a real laugh, warm and delighted, and Tamya felt her heart stutter. It had been so long since she'd heard him laugh like that, with pure joy, instead of the careful, measured responses she remembered from their recent encounters. "Thank you," she said quietly as Jeff closed the hood, "for fixing the door." "Thank you for letting me," he replied, and there was something deeper in his voice, as if he was thanking her for more than just the opportunity to repair a car door. As they prepared to leave, Amara suddenly turned back to Jeff. "Mr. Wilsman, are you going to be at school tomorrow for science club?" "If Mrs. Chen doesn't ban me for being a terrible playground supervisor," Jeff said with a smile. "You're not terrible," Amara protested. "You helped Sarah with her knee, and you knew about hopscotch physics, and you fixed our car. I think you're pretty good at supervising." The simple statement, delivered with 9-year-old sincerity, clearly affected Jeff deeply. "Thank you, Amara. That means a lot to me." As they drove home, Amara chattering about her day and her excitement for tomorrow's science club, Tamya found herself thinking about the man she'd just left standing in the school parking lot. This wasn't the polished, distant CEO who'd shown up at her clinic 2 weeks ago. This was someone gentler, more vulnerable. Someone who carried superhero band-aids and knew how to fix car doors and listened to 9-year-olds explain hopscotch strategy with genuine interest. This was someone who reminded her dangerously of the boy she'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. That night, after Amara was asleep, Tamya sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and tried to process the day. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for letting me be part of her world today, even just for a few minutes. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm going to keep showing up anyway. Not because I think I can force my way back into your lives, but because she deserves to know that her father wants to be there for her, even if it takes time for her to want me there too." Tamya stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "She asked about you tonight, about whether you'll really be at science club tomorrow. I told her yes, you would be. Don't make me a liar." His response came immediately. "I'll be there. I promise." And for the first time in 10 years, Tamya found herself believing that maybe Jeff Wilsman's promises might actually mean something after all. Outside her kitchen window, the Seattle night stretched wide and full of possibilities. Somewhere across the city, Jeff was probably lying awake too, thinking about hopscotch physics and Wonder Woman band-aids and the way their daughter's face lit up when she talked about science. For the first time since that night on the bus, Tamya allowed herself to consider the dangerous possibility that maybe, just maybe, some people really could change, and maybe, just maybe, some love stories deserved a second chance. Chapter 7. Healing the Wounds of Yesterday. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting Tamya from a restless sleep. Amara's name on her phone screen sent immediate panic through. Her system, her daughter was supposed to be safe in her bed just down the hall. "Mrs. Bacco, this is Dr. Patterson at Seattle Children's Hospital. Your daughter was brought in about an hour ago with symptoms of pneumonia. She's stable, but we'd like you to come in." Tamya's world tilted. Pneumonia? But she was fine when I put her to bed. She just had a little cough. "Children can deteriorate quickly with respiratory infections," Dr. Patterson said gently. "She's responding well to treatment, but she's been asking for you." Tamya was already throwing on clothes, her hands shaking as she searched for her keys. Mrs. Rodriguez, their neighbor who watched Amara when Tamya worked late shifts, must have found her struggling to breathe and called 911. Tamya's phone showed 3 missed calls. She'd been exhausted from pulling a double shift and had slept through them all. The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain-slicked streets and emergency lights. Tamya's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, every fear she'd carried as a single parent crystallizing into sharp terror. What if she'd lost her? What if she'd missed the signs? What if? Room 314, the nurse told her, and Tamya ran down the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. Amara looked so small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines and monitors, an oxygen mask covering half her face, but her eyes were alert and they lit up when she saw her mother. "Mama," she whispered, as Tamya gathered her into a careful hug, mindful of the IV lines and monitoring cables. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "I couldn't breathe," Amara said, her voice muffled by the oxygen mask. "Mrs. Rodriguez called the ambulance, and I was scared you wouldn't find me." "I'll always find you," Tamya promised, smoothing Amara's hair back from her feverish forehead. "Always." Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced woman with graying hair and tired eyes. "She's going to be fine," she assured Tamya immediately. "Bacterial pneumonia caught early. We've got her on antibiotics and respiratory support. She should be able to go home in a few days." Relief flooded through Tamya so powerfully that she had to sit down. "Thank you." Thank you so much. There's someone in the waiting room asking about her, Dr. Patterson added. A Mr. Wilsman. He says he's a family friend. Tanya's heart stuttered. Jeff's here? He's been here for about an hour. Apparently, Mrs. Rodriguez had your emergency contact list, and his number was on it from the school volunteer forms. Tanya closed her eyes, remembering. She'd listed Jeff as an emergency contact for school activities without really thinking about it, a reflexive action because his name had felt natural next to hers on the form. Can you stay with her for a minute? Tanya asked Dr. Patterson. I need to. Of course. Tanya found Jeff in the family waiting area, pacing like a caged animal. He'd clearly dressed in a hurry. Jeans, a wrinkled t-shirt, sneakers without socks. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and worry. How is she? He asked immediately when he saw Tanya. She's going to be okay, Tanya said, and watched Jeff's shoulders sag with relief. Bacterial pneumonia. They caught it early. Jeff sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. Mrs. Rodriguez called me around 1:30. She was crying, saying Amara couldn't breathe and the ambulance was coming, and I had to be here. You didn't have to come, Tanya said quietly, taking the seat next to him. Yes, I did. Jeff looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She's my daughter, Tanya. When someone calls to tell me she's in the hospital, there's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. The simple declaration, delivered with absolute conviction, cracked something open in Tanya's chest. This was what she'd dreamed of 10 years ago, a partner who would drop everything to be there when their child needed them, someone who understood that parenthood meant showing up, especially in the scary moments. She was asking for you, Tanya said softly. In the ambulance, Mrs. Rodriguez said she kept saying she wanted her mom and her dad. Jeff's breath hitched. She called me her dad? Not directly, but Mrs. Rodriguez said she was talking about the nice man from school who knows about science and fixes things. She wanted you there. Tears spilled down Jeff's cheeks, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Can I see her? Together, they walked back to Amara's room. Their daughter was drowsing, the fever medication making her sleepy, but she perked up. When she saw Jeff, Mr. Jeff, she said, her voice still raspy but stronger than before. You came. Of course I came, Jeff said, moving to the other side of her bed. I heard you weren't feeling well, and I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. The doctors are nice, Amara reported seriously. And the machines are really interesting. Did you know they can measure exactly how much oxygen is in your blood? It's like having a computer inside your body. Jeff smiled, his face still wet with tears. That is pretty amazing. Are you feeling better? A little. My chest still hurts, but not as much. And I'm not scared anymore because Mom's here, and you're here too. We're both here, Jeff confirmed, catching Tanya's eyes over their daughter's head. We're not going anywhere. Dr. Patterson reappeared to check Amara's vitals and adjust her medication. She's responding beautifully to treatment, she told them, but it's going to be a long night. You're welcome to take shifts if you'd like. The chairs convert to pull-out beds. I'm staying, Tanya said immediately. Me too, Jeff added. You don't have to, Tanya started. Try to make me leave, Jeff interrupted gently. Just try. As the night wore on, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. Tanya held Amara's hand while Jeff read to her from a book of science facts he'd somehow procured from the hospital gift shop. When Amara fell asleep, they sat in the uncomfortable chairs, speaking in whispers so they wouldn't wake her. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Mrs. Rodriguez hadn't been there, Tanya said, exhaustion making her voice raw. If she hadn't heard Amara coughing through the thin walls, if she hadn't thought to check on her, but she was there, Jeff said firmly, and Amara's okay. This time. Tanya wrapped her arms around herself. But what about next time? What if I'm working a double shift and something happens? What if there's no one to call 911? What if I fail her when she needs me most? You didn't fail her, Jeff said quietly. You gave her a neighbor who loves her enough to listen through the walls. You gave her a community of people who care about her. You gave her a mother who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. I gave her a life where she has to depend on neighbors because her father wasn't there, Tanya said bitterly. No, Jeff said, his voice steady. You gave her a life full of love, despite the fact that her father was an idiot who let his family's money matter more than his heart. The honesty of it, the complete lack of defensiveness or excuses, caught Tanya off guard. She looked at Jeff, really looked at him, and saw not the polished CEO or the guilty ex-boyfriend, but a man who was exactly as broken and terrified as she was. I used to lie awake at night when she was little, Tanya said softly, wondering what I'd do if she got sick or hurt or scared and I was all she had. It was the loneliest feeling in the world. You weren't alone, Jeff said quietly. I mean, I know you felt alone and that's my fault, but you were never actually alone. You had Mrs. Rodriguez and your mom and all the people at the clinic who care about you. You built a family for her, Tanya. Maybe not the family we planned, but a family nonetheless. I wanted the family we planned, she whispered. God, Jeff, I wanted it so much. Tell me about it, he said. Tell me what I missed. So she did. Sitting in the dim hospital room while their daughter slept, Tanya told Jeff about pregnancy cravings for mint chocolate chip ice cream at 3 in the morning, about going to childbirth classes alone and practicing breathing exercises with a teddy bear as her partner, about the moment Amara was born and the midwife placed her on Tanya's chest, and how the first thing she noticed was that the baby had Jeff's exact shade of green eyes. She told him about Amara's first word, Mama, and her first steps, taken at 11 months while Tanya was studying for a nursing exam. About the time 3-year-old Amara took apart their toaster to see the hot parts inside and how she'd put it back together so perfectly that it worked better than before. She started asking about you when she was 4, Tanya said. Not constantly, but sometimes. Usually when she saw other kids with their dads at the park or at school events, she'd want to know if you were smart like her, if you had green eyes like her, if you would like her science experiments. What did you tell her? The truth. That you were the smartest, kindest, most wonderful man I'd ever known. That she got her brilliant mind from you, that wherever you were, you would be incredibly proud of the person she was becoming. Jeff was crying again, silent tears that tracked down his cheeks in the blue light from the monitors. How could you say those things about me, after what I did to you? Because they were true, Tanya said simply. Just because you left doesn't mean you weren't wonderful. Just because you broke my heart doesn't mean I stopped loving the man who'd given me the best parts of himself. Tanya! Jeff's voice was broken. I know why you left now, she continued. Your father's threats, the pressure, all of it. I understand why a 20-year-old would be scared enough to run. But Jeff, you have to understand what that did to me. I didn't just lose my boyfriend. I lost my best friend, my study partner, my future. I lost the person who made me believe I could do anything. I'm so sorry, Jeff whispered. I'm so fucking sorry, Tanya. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that not a single day has passed in 10 years when I didn't regret leaving you. Then why didn't you come back? The question came out rawer than she'd intended. Even if you believed your father's threats at first, you're a smart man. You must have realized eventually that he was manipulating you. Jeff was quiet for a long moment watching Amara sleep. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because I was a coward, he said. Because the longer I stayed away, the more convinced I became that you were better off without me. Because I told myself you'd moved on, found someone worthy of you. built a beautiful life that I'd only destroy if I tried to come back into it. I never moved on, Tamya said quietly. There was never anyone else. How could there be? You set the bar impossibly high. Jeff looked at her with something like wonder. You never? A few dates over the years. Nothing serious. Nothing that made me feel even a fraction of what I felt with you. Tamya touched Amara's sleeping face gently. She was enough. Building a life for her. Watching her grow into this incredible person. It was enough, but lonely. God, it was so lonely sometimes. I'm here now, Jeff said, and there was something different in his voice. Not pleading or desperate, but steady, certain. I know I have no right to ask for another chance. I know I have to earn back your trust and prove that I'm not going anywhere. This time. But I'm here, Tamya, for whatever that's worth. What does that mean exactly? You're here? Jeff reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. His touch was warm, familiar, electric in a way that made her breath catch. It means I cut all ties with my father and his company, he said. It means I'm liquidating my trust fund and using the money to start a foundation that will provide scholarships for single mothers going to medical school. It means I bought a house in Amara's school district so I can be close to her. It means I'm not going anywhere ever again, whether you decide to give me another chance or not. Tamya stared at him. You did all that? I did all that, he confirmed. Because this, he gestured to encompass their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. This is my family. You are my family, and I'm done letting anyone else decide what matters more than the people I love. The words hung in the air between them, charged with 10 years of longing and regret and hope. Tamya felt something shift inside her chest, like a door she'd locked 10 years ago was finally creaking open. Jeff, I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since I was 20 years old, and I'll love you when I'm 90. I love the woman you were in college, and I love the incredible mother you've become. I love your strength and your compassion, and the way you've raised our daughter to be brilliant and kind. I love that you forgave me enough to speak well of me to her, even when you had every reason to poison her against me. Don't, Tamya whispered, but her hand was still in his, and she wasn't pulling away. I'm not asking you to love me back, Jeff continued. Not yet. I'm just asking for the chance to earn it. The chance to prove that I'm the man you fell in love with, not the boy who was too scared to fight for you. Amara stirred in her sleep, making a small sound of distress. Both parents immediately leaned forward, Tamya smoothing her daughter's hair while Jeff adjusted her blanket. For a moment, they were simply two people united in their love for their child, working together to keep her comfortable. She needs both of us, Tamya said softly, watching Amara settle back into peaceful sleep. Yes, Jeff agreed. She does. I'm scared, Tamya admitted. I'm scared of trusting you again. I'm scared of letting you into our life and then having you decide it's too hard or too complicated. I'm scared of Amara getting attached to you and then losing you. I'm scared too, Jeff said honestly. I'm scared I'll mess this up. I'm scared I'll never be good enough to deserve either of you. I'm scared that 10 years is too long to come back from. Maybe we can be scared together, Tamya said, and something in her voice made Jeff look at her sharply. Tamya, I never stopped loving you either, she said in a rush, the words exploding out like they'd been building pressure for 10 years. I tried. God knows I tried. But you're still there, in every good memory, in every moment of happiness with Amara. You're in her laugh, and her curiosity, and her stubborn chin. You're in the way she approaches problems and sees the world. I couldn't stop loving you, because you're woven into everything good in my life. Jeff's hand tightened on hers. Does that... It means I want to try, Tamya said, her voice shaking. It means I want to believe that people can change, that love can be stronger than fear, that our family can be what we always dreamed it could be. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, Tamya stood up and moved closer to Jeff's chair. He looked up at her with questioning eyes, and she could see her own vulnerability reflected there, the same desperate hope, the same terrified longing. "I'm sure," she whispered, and leaned down to kiss him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid the other might disappear. But then Jeff's hand came up to cup her face, and Tamya melted into him with a sob of relief and recognition. This was home. This was what she'd been missing for 10 years. Not just the physical touch, but the feeling of being completely known and completely loved. When they broke apart, both were crying. "I missed you," Jeff whispered against her lips. "Every day. I missed you. I missed you too," Tamya replied. "So much it felt like I was missing a part of myself." They held each other in the dim hospital room, their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, and for the first time in 10 years, both of them felt complete. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of hope and new beginnings. "What happens now?" Tamya asked, her head on Jeff's shoulder. "Now we take it one day at a time," Jeff said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Now we figure out how to be a family. Now we show Amara what it looks like when two people love each other enough to fight for their happiness." "I want that," Tamya said. "I want all of that." "Then we'll have it," Jeff promised. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we'll have it." As the sun rose over the city, Amara stirred and opened her eyes to find both her parents beside her bed, holding hands and smiling through their tears. "Are you guys okay?" she asked, her voice still raspy but concerned. "We're perfect," Tamya said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "We're finally perfect." And for the first time in her 9 years of life, Amara fell back asleep feeling completely safe, surrounded by the love of both her parents and the promise of all the tomorrows they would share together. Chapter 8. The Moment Truth Changes Everything. 3 weeks after the hospital, Amara was back to her energetic self, though Tamya still caught her breath every time her daughter coughed. Jeff was no longer the friendly volunteer, but a constant presence, picking Amara up from school, helping with homework, fixing their washing machine, and teaching her to change a tire. Today was Amara's 10th birthday, and Jeff had planned the most epic birthday celebration in the history of 10-year-olds. Their small apartment was decorated with purple and silver streamers, and the coffee table groaned under carefully wrapped presents. "Close your eyes," Jeff said, placing a large box in front of Amara. "This one's special," Amara giggled, covering her eyes, while Tamya watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart full. "Okay, open them." Amara gasped at the telescope, a beautiful professional-grade instrument. "It's just like the ones real astronomers use," Jeff explained, kneeling beside her. "We can set it up tonight and look at the moon, Jupiter, and maybe some nebulas." "This is for me?" Amara breathed, running her hands over the smooth metal. "Really?" "Really," Jeff confirmed. "I figured it was time you had tools to match your curiosity about the universe." Amara threw her arms around Jeff's neck. "Thank you, Jeff. This is the best present anyone's ever given me." "You're welcome, sweetheart. But there's something else I want to give you today, something even more important than a telescope." Amara tilted her head curiously. "What's that?" Jeff glanced at Tamya, who nodded encouragingly. They'd talked about this moment for days, trying to find the right words, the right time. But watching their daughter's face light up with wonder and joy, surrounded by the evidence of how much she was loved, Tamya knew there would never be a more perfect moment. "Well," Jeff said carefully, "you know how you've always wondered about your dad." Amara's expression grew serious. "Yeah, Mom says he was really smart and would be proud of me." "Your mom is absolutely right," Jeff said, his voice thick with emotion. "He is incredibly proud of you every single day." "How do you know?" Amara asked, confused. Jeff took a deep breath. "Because, Amara, I'm your dad." The words hung in the air. Amara stared at Jeff with wide green eyes, processing this with careful consideration. "You're my dad?" she said slowly. "My real dad." "Your real dad," Jeff confirmed. "I knew it," Amara interrupted, her face breaking into a brilliant smile. I didn't consciously know it, but something inside me knew. You have my eyes, and you think like me, and you understand science the same way I do. And you feel like family, you know? Like you belong with us." The simple, innocent acceptance hit Jeff like a physical blow. He'd spent weeks agonizing over this conversation, imagining anger or confusion or rejection. He'd never imagined that his daughter would greet the news with pure joy. "You're not mad?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would I be mad?" Amara asked practically. "I've been wanting a dad my whole life, and it turns out I had one all along. That's like the best birthday surprise ever." Jeff laughed, but it came out as a sob. "I'm sorry I wasn't here before. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you." "But you're here now," Amara said, echoing the words Jeff had spoken to Tanya in the hospital. "That's what matters, right? That you're here now and you're going to stay?" "I'm never leaving," Jeff promised, pulling her into his arms. "Never, ever, ever leaving. You're stuck with me for the rest of your life." "Good," Amara said firmly, hugging him back. "Because I have a lot of science experiments planned, and I'm going to need an assistant." Tanya wiped tears from her cheeks as she watched her daughter and Jeff hold each other. 10 years of separation healing in the space of a single embrace. This was what love looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but complete and unbreakable and absolutely right. "So," Amara said, pulling back to look at both her parents, "does this mean we're a family now? Like, officially?" "We've always been a family," Tanya said, joining them on the couch. "We were just missing a piece for a while. But now we're all together," Amara said with satisfaction. "Mom, Dad, and me, a real family." The word "dad," spoken in Amara's clear, confident voice, made Jeff close his eyes and take a shuddering breath. 10 years of wondering, 10 years of guilt and regret and desperate longing, and it all came down to this: his daughter calling him Dad, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said, looking between her parents with curious eyes. "Anything," Jeff said immediately. "Why weren't you here before? I'm not mad or anything, but I'd like to understand." Jeff and Tanya exchanged glances. They'd prepared for this question too, trying to find an age-appropriate way to explain family pressure and manipulation and the mistakes people make when they're young and scared. "Sometimes," Jeff said carefully, "adults make really bad decisions when they're afraid. When I was younger, I let other people convince me that leaving was the right thing to do, even though it felt wrong in my heart. I thought I was protecting you and your mom, but really I was just being a coward." "What changed your mind?" Amara asked. "I saw you," Jeff said simply. "At the science fair. I looked at this brilliant, beautiful girl explaining statistical analysis, like it was poetry, and I realized I'd been an idiot. I realized that nothing in the world was more important than being your dad." Amara considered this with the seriousness of someone much older than 10. "Well," she said finally, "I'm glad you figured it out, even if it took you a really long time." "Me too," Jeff agreed. "And I promise from now on I'm going to make much better decisions, starting with this one." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, causing Tanya's breath to catch. "Jeff," she said, her voice full of warning, "what are you doing?" "Something I should have done 10 years ago," he said, sliding off the couch to kneel in front of both Tanya and Amara. "Something I want to do in front of our daughter, so she knows that when I make promises now, I keep them." Amara's eyes went wide. "Are you going to propose to Mom?" "If she'll have me," Jeff said, his eyes never leaving Tanya's face. "Tanya Bako, you are the love of my life, the mother of my child, and the strongest person I've ever known." I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you and Amara?" Tamya stared at the ring, a simple solitaire that caught the morning light like captured starfire, and felt her heart stutter. It was too soon. Her practical mind protested. They'd only been back together for 3 weeks. They had so much to work through, so many conversations yet to have. But then she looked at Amara's face, glowing with excitement and hope, and at Jeff's face, open and vulnerable, and full of the kind of love that had always made her believe in impossible things. "Say yes, Mom," Amara whispered, bouncing with anticipation. "Please say yes. I want us to be a real family so bad." "We're already a real family," Tamya said, but she was smiling through her tears. "But yes, yes, I'll marry you." Jeff's face crumpled with relief and joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and Tamya realized with a start that it was the exact ring they'd looked at in a jewelry store window 10 years ago, when they were young and broke and planning a future that seemed impossibly bright. "You remembered," she whispered. "I remembered everything," Jeff said, kissing her hand. "Every conversation, every dream, every promise we made to each other. I've been carrying them with me for 10 years, waiting for the chance to make them come true." "This is so romantic," Amara declared, clapping her hands. "Are we going to have a wedding? Can I be the maid of honor? Can we have cake?" "We'll have the biggest, most beautiful wedding you want," Jeff promised, gathering both Tamya and Amara into his arms, with cake and flowers and dancing and everything. "And you'll really be my dad forever?" Amara asked, suddenly serious again. "You won't change your mind or have to go away for work or anything?" "I will really be your dad forever," Jeff said solemnly. "I'll adopt you officially if that's what you want, so the whole world knows you're mine. I'll come to every school event and science fair and soccer game and recital. I'll help with homework and teach you to drive and walk you down the aisle at your wedding someday, assuming I don't lock you in a tower to keep boys away from you." Amara giggled. "You can't lock me in a tower. That's scientifically impractical." "Maybe. Just a very tall house with excellent security systems," Jeff conceded, making both his girls laugh. As they sat together on the couch, Amara between her parents, admiring Tamya's ring and making plans for the wedding, the telescope forgotten in its box, none of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street or the photographer with the telephoto lens capturing images of their perfect family moment. In his downtown office, Harold Wilsman studied the photos with cold calculation. His son had chosen his path, had cut ties with the family business and fortune to play house with a nurse and her child. It was disappointing, but not surprising. Jeffrey had always been too soft, too sentimental. But Harold had built an empire by never accepting defeat gracefully, and he wasn't about to start now. If Jeffrey wanted to throw away his birthright for this woman and her daughter, so be it, but he wouldn't make it easy for them. Harold picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Helena, it's Harold Wilsman. I think it's time we discussed your return to Seattle. Jeffrey appears to need guidance in making appropriate life choices." But in Tamya's small apartment, surrounded by birthday decorations and filled with laughter, the Wilsman family was too lost in their own happiness to sense the storm gathering on the horizon. For now, they had this moment, this perfect, complete moment of being exactly who they were meant to be. Amara looked at the ring on her mother's finger, then at Jeff's face, then back at her mother. "I love you both so much," she said simply. "Thank you for finding each other again. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for waiting for us," Jeff said, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you for being patient while we figured out how to be the parents you deserved. Thank you for being exactly who you are," Tamya added, wrapping her arms around both her husband-to-be and their daughter. "Thank you for being our hope and our heart and our everything." Outside, Seattle sparkled in The afternoon sun, full of possibilities and new beginnings. And in a small apartment filled with love, a family that had been broken was finally beautifully whole. As they set up the telescope on the fire escape, Jeff showed Amara how to find Jupiter while Tamya made hot chocolate, a birthday tradition. From when Amara was 4, "Dad, look!" Amara exclaimed. "Jupiter has stripes, and those tiny dots, are those really moons?" "Those are really moons," Jeff confirmed, his heart swelling every time she called him Dad. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Galileo discovered them over 400 years ago. So, we're seeing the same things Galileo saw. That's like time traveling with light. Jeff caught Tamya's eye over their daughter's head, both marveling at the brilliant mind they'd created together. "Make a wish," Jeff told Amara as they spotted their first shooting star. "I don't need to," Amara replied, nestled safely between her parents under a blanket. "Everything I ever wished for already came true." And as the stars wheeled overhead, the newly reunited family held each other close and dreamed of all the tomorrows they would share, unaware that their greatest test was yet to come, but confident that together they could weather any storm. Chapter 9. When Love Faces Its Greatest Test. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier, who looked apologetic. Inside was a petition that made Tamya's blood turn to ice. Helena Ashworth Wilsman versus Jeffrey Wilsman and Tamya Bacco, petition for emergency custody and guardianship of minor child Amara Bacco. Tamya's hands shook as she read. The petitioner seeks emergency custody of the minor child Amara Bacco, age 10, on grounds that the current living situation presents immediate danger to the child's welfare. The biological father has demonstrated a pattern of abandonment and instability, having previously abandoned all parental responsibilities for 10 years before suddenly re-entering the child's life. The biological mother has demonstrated poor judgment in allowing an unstable influence around her vulnerable daughter. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Helena Ashworth Wilsman, Jeff's ex-wife, the woman he'd married briefly in Boston before divorcing 2 years later. Tamya had never met her, but she knew the name. Old Boston Money, the kind of woman Harold Wilsman had always intended his son to marry. "Mom?" Amara appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, ready for school. "What's wrong? You look scared." Tamya quickly folded the papers, forcing a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just some boring adult paperwork. Are you ready for your math test today? I studied with Dad last night, remember? He said I could probably teach the class myself at this point." Amara's face lit up at the mention of Jeff, the way it always did. In the 2 months since they'd become an official family, she'd bloomed like a flower in sunshine, secure in the knowledge that both her parents loved her unconditionally. The thought of anyone trying to take that security away from her made Tamya feel physically sick. "Mom, seriously, what's in those papers?" Amara asked, her 10-year-old perceptiveness cutting through Tamya's attempted deception. "You look like you did when I was in the hospital." Before Tamya could answer, Jeff's key turned in the lock. He'd moved in officially 3 weeks ago, after a whirlwind engagement and a simple courthouse wedding with just Amara, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Tamya's mother as witnesses. They'd planned a bigger celebration for later, but none of them had wanted to wait to be a family. "Good morning, beautiful girls," Jeff called, appearing in the kitchen with coffee and pastries from Amara's favorite bakery. But his smile faded when he saw Tamya's face. "What's wrong?" Silently, Tamya handed him the legal papers. She watched his expression change as he read. Confusion giving way to understanding, then to fury so intense it made him physically step backward. "That bitch," he said quietly, then immediately looked at Amara. "Sorry, sweetheart. That's not appropriate language." "Who's Helena Ashworth Wilsman?" Amara asked, reading over Jeff's shoulder with the quick comprehension that made her parents proud and terrified in equal measure. Jeff closed the papers before she could read more. "She's someone from my past, before I came back to you and your mom, and she wants to take me away." Amara's voice was small, scared in a way that made both parents' hearts break. "No one is taking you anywhere," Jeff said firmly, kneeling down to her level. "I promise you, Amara, no one is ever going to separate our family." "But she says you abandoned me," Amara said, her eyes filling with tears. "She says Mom made bad choices. She says a lot of things that aren't true," Tamya interrupted, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. "Some people try to hurt others by saying mean things in legal papers, but that doesn't make them true." "Then why is she doing this?" Amara asked. Jeff and Tamya exchanged glances over their daughter's head. "How do you explain to a 10-year-old that some people view children as pawns in larger games? That money and power can corrupt people into believing they have the right to destroy families for their own purposes?" "Sometimes," Jeff said carefully, "when people are angry about choices other people make, they try to use the courts to force things to go their way. Helena is angry that I chose to be with you and your mom instead of staying married to her." "But you love us," Amara said, as if that simple fact should settle the matter. "More than anything in the world," Jeff confirmed. "And that's exactly why we're going to fight this and win." After they sent Amara off to school with extra hugs and reassurances, Jeff immediately called his lawyer while Tamya paced the kitchen, reading and rereading the custody petition. "Richard, I need you to drop everything," Jeff said into the phone. "Helena's filing for emergency custody of Amara. Yes, I know it sounds insane. No, I don't care what it costs, because she's my daughter and I'm not losing her." The lawyer's end of the conversation was clearly not encouraging based on Jeff's increasingly tense responses. "What do you mean she has grounds?" Jeff demanded. "I've been in Amara's life consistently for months now. Yes, I understand that 10 years of absence doesn't look good. No, Tamya is not an unfit mother. That's fucking ridiculous." Tamya's phone rang while Jeff was arguing with his lawyer. "Unknown number. Ms. Bacco, this is Helena Ashworth Wilsman. I think we need to talk." The voice was crisp, educated, with elite boarding school accent. Tamya's free hand clenched. "I have nothing to say to you. Meet me for coffee in an hour. Pike Place Market, second-level cafe. Come alone." "I'm not—" "Ms. Bacco, I have lawyers, unlimited resources, and a compelling argument that a 10-year-old deserves stability, rather than being caught in her father's midlife crisis." 1 hour. The line went dead. "Who was that?" Jeff asked, having finished his own call. "Helena. She wants to meet." "Absolutely not," Jeff said immediately. "Tamya, you can't—" "I have to," Tamya interrupted. "If there's any chance of resolving this without putting Amara through a custody battle, I have to try." An hour later, Tamya sat across from Helena Ashworth Wilsman in a cafe overlooking Elliott Bay. Helena was stunning in the way of women who'd never doubted their worth. Blonde, elegant, refined beauty that graced magazine covers. "You're prettier than I expected," Helena said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I can see why Jeffrey was infatuated." "What do you want?" "I want Jeffrey back," Helena said simply, "and I'm prepared to use whatever leverage necessary, including trying to take our daughter." "Your daughter is leverage. I don't actually want custody of a 10-year-old. Children are noisy and interfere with travel." But Jeffrey's always been sentimental about family. The casual cruelty made Tamya's stomach turn. "You're talking about a child." "I'm talking about a strategic asset," Helena interrupted. "One that you're going to help me deploy." "I would never—" "Oh, but you will. Because the alternative is a very public custody battle that will traumatize your daughter and expose every detail of your relationship to media scrutiny." Tamya felt sick. "There's nothing wrong with working hard to support my family." "Of course not," Helena agreed smoothly. But a good lawyer can make anything look irresponsible. The night shifts at the clinic while your daughter was home alone. The catering jobs that kept you away on weekends. The fact that you let Jeffrey into her life so quickly after 10 years of absence, without proper psychological evaluation or background checks. He's her father. Is he? Helena's smile turned predatory. Because my lawyers have been very thorough, Miss Bacco. There's no paternity test on file, no legal documentation establishing Jeffrey's parental rights. For all the court knows, you're a desperate single mother who's latched onto a wealthy man and convinced a lonely little girl to call him daddy. The words hit Tamia like physical blows. Everything Helena was saying was technically true. In their joy at being reunited, they'd never bothered with legal formalities. Amara's birth certificate listed father as unknown, and they'd been planning to handle adoption paperwork after the wedding. What do you want? Tamia asked again, her voice hollow. I want you to convince Jeffrey that this relationship isn't working, Helena said. I want you to tell him that the pressure is too much, that Amara is confused and acting out, that you think it's better if he steps back for a while. I want you to break up with him. And if I do that? Then I withdraw the custody petition with a gracious statement about how I was concerned for the child's welfare. But now I see that the situation has resolved itself naturally. Everyone wins. Except Amara, Tamia pointed out. And Jeff. And me. Well, Helena said with a shrug, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Tamia stared at this woman, beautiful, wealthy, utterly without conscience, and felt a rage so pure it surprised her. No, she said simply. Helena's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I said no. Tamia stood up, her hands trembling but her voice steady. I'm not going to destroy my family to satisfy your twisted need for control. If you want to fight us in court, bring it on. But I'm not going to hand you Jeffrey and Amara just because you threaten us. Ms. Bacco, you don't understand what you're up against. I understand perfectly, Tamia interrupted. I'm up against a spoiled woman who thinks people are possessions to be collected and traded. But here's what you don't understand. Jeffrey isn't the same man you married. He's not someone who can be manipulated or threatened into abandoning his family. And Amara and I aren't going anywhere. Helena's composure cracked slightly. You're making a mistake. I have resources you can't even imagine. And I have something you'll never understand, Tamia said, leaning forward. I have a family worth fighting for. I have a daughter who deserves both her parents and a husband who would burn the world down before he'd let anyone hurt us. You can't buy that, Helena. You can't threaten it away or manipulate it out of existence. We'll see, Helena said coldly. As Tamia walked away from the cafe, her phone buzzed with a text from Jeff. How did it go? She wants you back and she's using Amara as leverage, Tamia typed back. But I told her no. Good, come home. We need to prepare for war. But when Tamia arrived home, she found Jeff at their kitchen table with a man in an expensive suit, clearly Helena's lawyer. Tamia, Jeff said, his face grey. This is David Morrison. He's representing Helena, Ms. Bacco, Morrison said coldly. I'm here to inform you that my client has filed an emergency motion for immediate temporary custody, citing new evidence of imminent danger. What evidence? Tamia demanded. Morrison pulled out photographs. These show the child walking to school alone, crossing busy streets without adult supervision. Tamia stared at images of Amara's normal morning routine. She walks to school. Lots of kids walk to school. Not children who are the subject of custody disputes, Morrison replied. The hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. After Morrison left, Jeff and Tamia sat in stunned silence. They're going to take her, Tamia whispered. No, Jeff said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. They are not taking Amara. That evening, when Amara came home bubbling about a science project, they had to tell her about the court hearing. "But I don't want to live with Helena," Amara said, scared. "I want to stay with you and Dad." "We're going to fight for you," Jeff promised. "Whatever happens, we're going to fight for our family." Chapter 10, Love's Perfect Victory. The King County Courthouse buzzed with tension. Judge Patricia Chen presided over courtroom 4B with no-nonsense efficiency. Tamia sat beside Jeff, feeling outmatched by Helena's legal team. But behind them, the gallery was filled with unexpected support. Mrs. Rodriguez, Dr. Martinez, and nurses. From the clinic, Mrs. Chen and teachers from Amara's school, and Tamia's mother Maria, who'd flown in despite her fear of flying. "This court's only concern is the best interests of the child," Judge Chen began. "Nothing else matters." Helena's lawyer called a private investigator who'd been photographing Amara, but instead of supporting their case, he testified, "She seemed happy, confident. The whole neighborhood watches out for her. If anything, she seemed more aware and socially connected than most kids I observe." Mrs. Rodriguez testified about Tamia's dedication and how Amara was finally complete with Jeff in her life. Dr. Martinez spoke about Tamia's professionalism. Mrs. Chen described Amara's remarkable achievements, but it was Maria's testimony that truly moved the courtroom. "My daughter," she said in heavily accented English, struggling to find the words. "She give up everything for Amara. Medical school, her dreams, everything. She work 3 jobs, never complain. She make sure Amara have everything she need, love, education, values. When Jeff come back, I see my daughter finally happy again. I see my granddaughter have papa who love her like she deserve." "Mrs. Bacco," Richard said gently, "in your opinion, is Amara better off with both her parents?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Mijo," she said, looking directly at Jeff, "you hurt my daughter very bad 10 years ago, but I see you now. I see how you love them both. Amara need her papa. Family is family." When it was time for Amara to testify, Judge Chen called her to chambers rather than putting her on the witness stand in open court. Jeff and Tamia were allowed to accompany her, along with both legal teams. Amara sat in the big leather chair, across from Judge Chen's desk, her legs swinging because they didn't quite reach the floor, but her voice was clear and confident as she answered questions. "Amara," Judge Chen said kindly, "do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, ma'am. Some lady named Helena wants me to come live with her instead of with my mom and dad. And how do you feel about that?" Amara's expression grew serious. "I don't want to live with Helena. I don't even know her. She's never read me bedtime stories, or helped with my homework, or taught me about constellations. Why would I want to live with someone who doesn't know me?" "Tell me about your dad," Judge Chen said. "Jeff, how long have you known he was your father?" "I figured it out at the science fair," Amara said proudly. "He has the same eyes as me, and he thinks about problems the same way I do. Plus, he felt like family right away, you know, like he belonged with us." "And do you feel safe with him?" "Super safe," Amara said immediately. "He carries superhero band-aids in case I get hurt, and he knows first aid, and he fixed our car when it was broken. He teaches me about science and helps me with math problems that are too hard for other grown-ups. And he makes my mom happy. She smiles all the time now." "What would you say to Helena if she were here?" Judge Chen asked. Amara thought about this. "Seriously, I'd say thank you for being worried about me, but I already have a family. I don't need a rich mom. I need the mom who stayed up all night when I was sick and worked 3 jobs to buy me books and never, ever made me feel like I was too much trouble. And I don't need a rich dad. I need the dad who reads me stories about space and lets me help him fix things and promises he'll never leave again." Judge Chen nodded slowly. "One more question, Amara. What makes you happy?" "Being with my mum and dad," Amara said without hesitation. Learning new things and doing experiments and knowing that when I come home from school, they'll both be there wanting to hear about my day. That's what makes me happy. Back in the courtroom, there was sudden commotion. Harold Wilsman entered with FBI agents and a woman carrying a briefcase. Your Honor, the woman said, I'm Agent Kim with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have information relevant to this case. We've been investigating embezzlement from the Wilsman Foundation. Helena Ashworth Wilsman has been systematically stealing from the foundation for 3 years, using the money to fund this custody suit as part of an extortion scheme. Helena went pale. Harold walked to the witness stand. 10 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, he said, looking at Amara. I threatened my son into leaving the woman he loved. Yesterday, I met Amara for the first time. She is brilliant, kind, confident, and clearly loved beyond measure. My son has found his family, and I'll be damned if I let my past mistakes destroy his future again. Judge Chen was quiet for a long moment. In 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen a case where the child's best interests were so clear. This little girl is thriving. Ms. Ashworth Wilsman, your petition is denied. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Amara threw herself into Jeff's arms, while Tamya sobbed with relief. 6 months later, the Wilsman family stood on a bluff overlooking Puget Sound. Jeff had rented the campsite for a weekend, bringing Amara's telescope and s'mores supplies. Look, Mom, Amara called from the telescope. I found Jupiter. You can see 3 of its moons. Jeff appeared beside Tamya, taking her hand. A year ago, I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness forever. But standing here with you and Amara, I realize I've been given something even better, a life more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. We're already married, but I never properly proposed with our daughter as witness. Will you marry me again? In front of all our friends and family this time? Yes, Tamya said, laughing through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. 3 months later, they renewed their vows in a garden overlooking Elliott Bay, surrounded by everyone who'd stood with them. Amara served as maid of honor, beaming with pride at her parents' love. The story ended not with simple, happily ever after, but with a beginning. In their new house, Jeff taught Amara advanced calculus, while Tamya, now pregnant with twins, watched from the kitchen doorway and marveled at the family they'd built from broken dreams. Mom, Amara called, working on a genetics project. Do you think the babies will be as smart as me? Smarter, Tamya said, her hand on her growing belly. They'll have the advantage of growing up in a house full of love from day one. Jeff caught Tamya's eye, his expression full of wonder and endless love. They'd traveled a long, difficult road, but every struggle had been worth it for this moment, this perfect, complete, unbreakable family. Love had won, as it always does when it's brave enough to fight for what matters most.